can't really bring transformational just from the software layer alone, right? Because at the end of it, it's software plus what you deliver to the users, and also to the entire process of getting them to adapt to a change management process that they least joyful about, right? So that being said, the transformational component of your software is really part of a larger integrated service delivery model that cuts across software to onboarding to support to ongoing account management, that really you need as a company to think about how can you do much more for your customers than what they're paying you for, and bring that mindset into integrated delivery model all the way from software to constant account management for success.
Welcome to another episode of Dental Riffs. My name is Gary Bird. I'm the CEO of SMC National. We provide dental marketing new patients for dental offices just like yours and help it make your patient flow predictable.
My name is Tanner Applegate, co-host of Dental Riffs. I am the CEO and founder of Unified Dental. We are a platform that is trying to bring all of the third-party applications together into one single solution.
All right, so this is a special episode, and I'm super excited. So a couple things. Number one, I've never had a podcast with this many people on it, so I'm going to do my best to play referee. But today we have several folks from that are CEOs or that run a company that manage PMSs. So this is really, really, really exciting for me because there's been a lot of chatter online about different ways of doing things. And I wanted to get it straight from the people who actually do it. And I think that's the best way to move this conversation forward. So what I want to do, I'll start with Rick, because he's right here on the right of me. Rick, why don't you introduce yourself and then tell us why people should consider going to the cloud when it comes to the PMS.
Sure, Gary. My name is Rick Collison. I'm certainly the newest member of this audio or this group and probably the audience. I'm 2 weeks into my role at Oryx as the CEO. My background is actually 20 years of cloud. So I come from the enterprise space, dealing with people like, Ford on one end, who were kind of the last ones to go to the cloud, to Google. I personally manage the Google account for the company I was working with. So you get the two extremes, everything in between, Nestle and folks that are really global players. And the cloud journey in the large enterprise started, 20 years ago, which is when I was involved in it. In all of the issues that you're hearing, I had the good fortune of being at a conference in Denver, and all of the things I heard on main stage, and all of the things I heard from the from the practitioners, from the executives, is exactly what I heard some 20 years ago. And ultimately, the reason to go to the cloud. The simple reason, and what most people think of, is really the kind of the IT side of it. I don't have to deal with servers. I don't have to deal with installing software. But I think the real crown jewel is the stream of innovation that you get. You show up on a Monday morning, and the thing you wish the software always would do, now it does, and you didn't have to do anything. It just shows up. And I think ultimately that continuous improvement, which we all do in our personal life, is really what the technology enables when you talk about the cloud. And I think that's the best case for it.
Awesome. And Abhi, why don't you go next from CareStack?
Yeah. So my name is Abhi. I'm the founder CEO for CareStack. We are a technology platform for the dental industry that brings together all the solutions that is needed for managing daily operations. I would like to expand on what Rick just said regarding the benefits of going to the cloud. So, things like accessibility to information, ability to cut down on recurring costs, those are all like your usual benefits of going to the cloud. But I believe, the future of cloud is going to create a situation where, as providers, you get the ability for better interoperability, right? You get the ability to share patient data with patients and possibly with other providers who are involved in the continuum of care, and not just, doctors alone, but even with care teams which are beyond dental, right? Which are also part of the medical fraternity. You get to really create a interoperable system for sharing of information for the future of where dentistry is moving, which is moving towards the integrated care model. So the biggest benefit in my mind is capabilities that you can bring to the market around interoperability as a key driver for better healthcare coordination from a patient standpoint. Besides that, the way cloud technologies are moving the needle around improving better clinical decision support systems, better enablement for the front office and the back office teams, more support towards an integrated care model, more consumer engagement. All these benefits, which are typically absent in a client server environment, becomes far more accelerated when you choose an adoption to the cloud.
Awesome. And Eric, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us why cloud is the direction people should start going?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I think everything was super well said, and in addition to interoperability and reducing costs and having a centralized database, I think the one area that I might add, and from our perspective in Planet DDS, we work a lot with the DSO market, is the scalability and centralization of being in the cloud. Particularly for folks that are acquiring new offices, being on a central solution and being able to bring new offices into that solution allows you to scale and grow more quickly. And I think ultimately probably increases your exit value as a DSO. The other thing is centralization. Like Abhi hit on this a little bit. The ability to kind of do things, specialized stuff in the DSO market, having centralized billing, centralized scheduling and such. I think you get a big benefit of doing that in the cloud, not having to monitor or manage a big interconnected database. So I think that's the one thing I'd add.
Awesome. And Dr. Saleh, why don't you give a quick introduction of yourself and kind of about the transition that you're going through?
I'm Rania Saleh. I'm the founder of Oryx. I'm a dentist by training, then practice owner, then a multi-practice owner, up to getting pregnant with twins and seeing my practices not performing the way I wanted them to. And I had to find a solution. I looked around me for a lot of solutions. And what I realized that the clinical component was lacking in most software. And this is what I was the most passionate about. We decided to go with the cloud software for all the reasons that everyone mentioned here. And this is where we're at.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation. Tanner, why don't you go ahead and tee up the next question?
Yeah. So for sure, a lot of you guys know that the acceleration towards cloud is happening fast, right? The number of practices that switch every year, the percentage of that number that switches is shifting towards cloud more and more. But there's still a large percentage of DSOs or just kind of dental offices in general that are choosing on-prem solutions. Is there an argument that can be made of why you would want to choose an on-prem solution over a cloud solution? So playing devil's advocate, right? You guys are obviously all CEOs of a cloud-based solution, but if you were to play devil's advocate for an on-prem solution, is there a benefit or a reason to choose that over the cloud?
I'll take a shot at it since I've seen the argument go over many times in my career. The one that comes to mind first and foremost, it's this. If you're really risk adverse, the fear of unknown, the fear of change. I think that's first and foremost, to be honest with you, because I think over the long run, I don't think anybody really disagrees that at some point in time, maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's 10 years from now, the cloud will win out. I truly believe that. But the question is, well, when? I think it's when should I go, not if I should go. And if your staff, your personality, your practice, your DNA is risk adverse, you'll take the safe bet. And the safe bet is just do what I've been doing. That's just human nature. And I think that's the argument for staying there. I think the other one is just you can control everything about it. Now that means you need to get more into the technology. You need to configure. You need to invest. But there is an argument that says if you want to truly do custom everything, you can only do that on premise. I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm saying if that's what you decide you need, then you need total control. And you could argue, well, you should be a vendor, not not a dentist's office, but there is a lot of systems that have a lot of ability to extend, more so on the on-prem world. And if that's your gig, then go crazy. But be prepared for total cost of ownership over time, because it ain't going to get cheaper.
Maybe I can throw in some data and some numbers around the transition to the cloud versus on-prem, and give some perspectives based on our learnings over the last 5-6 years. Um, a dental software transition is really like an open heart surgery for the most part, because you're really propagating change and trying to affect behavioral change inside offices. So for these reasons, based on the research that we have done extensively over the last couple of years, there's roughly 5,000 transitions or so that happens in a year where people change systems, where they decide to move from one system to another, right? And roughly 30% of these transitions are quite often from one sort of a client service system to a different one. And over the years, we have seen, the cloud adoption really scaled up to 70% of the market for those systems, for those offices which are transitioning off of systems, which means roughly in a year, you have 3,500 or so unique transitions that happens in the industry, not offices, but unique businesses transitioning from one software to another. Now, that being said, out of that 3,500, it's really that's kind of what the cloud market really comes down to. It has really scaled over the years to roughly 3,500 transitions, right? And those transitions happen for two different reasons based on our experience working through the process of engaging with these prospects. There's one class of customers who really look for a transition simply because they can't live with the pain of having to work with multiple systems, right? And the practice management software is a pursuit of pain. It's not a pursuit of pleasure, which means you have to experience direct vexing pain, which ranges from missing appointments to inability to verify insurances to no shows and cancellations climbing up and not knowing what to do and not anywhere staying in control of your operations, the sort of pain which has a bottom line impact, right? So there's a class of customers who clearly know that that they're using multiple systems, quite often bolted on top of existing client server systems, and it's really causing a bottom line impact, which is causing them to lose money, and they're going through direct pain. They're seeking resolution for that pain. That's one class of customers. The second class of customers who really look at moving over to the cloud are those customers who are actually happy with what they have in the first two offices or so that they have really started, but then they figure out as they are adding the next set of offices, their current infrastructure that works well for them today isn't sufficient enough to really support them for the future, right? And those guys basically consider a movement to the cloud far more seriously, and you get a motivated prospect in the process, right? So just to sum it up, as it stands today in the market, you have roughly 3,500 transitions, which qualify as your base for transitions to the cloud. Pretty much you can divide it into two kinds of customers. One set of customers who are going through pain on their current systems, and the second set of customers who are okay, but who have plans for growth, and they have figured out that a more centralized way of managing operations that allows them to reduce overheads per location, both direct and indirectly, those guys choose an adoption to the cloud. And a cloud transition is not certainly for everyone, right? So like what Rick said, if you don't fall into these classes of customers, your motivation to effect change is quite often low, and therefore you're far better off, choosing to do something that you're comfortable with.
So I have a follow-up to that, Abhi. I love that insight and that perspective of dividing the two different customers of how they're changing and why they're changing, right? The first one of the feeling the pain, I think that makes sense, right? There's a lot of people that are just so frustrated with the system that it makes sense why they want to switch. But the second one of the one that is comfortable but understands that there are still things that need to change as they scale and change their organization, those are the ones to me that it seems like there's a lot more opportunity to accelerate people's switch through that channel, right? So my question then, I guess, posing to you guys, maybe individually as companies or as an industry as a whole, is what is the educational channel towards this second group of like, hey, I'm okay with where I'm at, but I could be way better if I did switch. How are we accelerating that to be able to educate the opportunities and the benefits of taking that open heart surgery and actually switching PMSs?
Sure, Tana. I think I took my question. I just want someone else to have the opportunity to pick on this one. Eric, you want to take this one?
No, I think it is. If someone has the answer to that on this podcast, I'd love to take it successfully. I think it's the hardest question to. I think it is. I mean, dentists or doctors are busy. They're just, particularly in independent practices, and even in DSOs and decision makers, there's a lot to do, and it is. Open heart surgery is probably a good way to put it. It's not probably the most positive, but it kind of sometimes does feel like that. So it's about getting the mind share of folks and highlighting the current pain when they've got 10 other things to do every day that aren't necessarily the pain of switching software. So I think that the best channels to educate folks are, for at least we find, is conferences. And candidly, I think there's also, like, nobody's actually been through a good conversion. I think no one would say, hey, that was an awesome experience, I can't wait to do it again next year. So like talking to other people who have seen the light or seen the other side of what it could look like, to Abhi's point, when you're on a cloud solution, is a lot more probably beneficial than hearing it from any of us. So to the extent that cloud becomes more predominant and more common within the industry, and more folks, like not just us, but customers are talking about the benefit of being on a cloud solution, I think that candidly is probably the best channel.
Rania, anything to add?
I want to say, like, maybe 3 years ago, when I would talk to prospects, they were all very afraid of the cloud. Like, what if my internet goes down? You had a lot more objections than I hear these days. I feel people are a lot more open to the cloud as the adoption is growing, and as they're seeing that it's not as scary as we thought it was. So I think sharing success stories, regardless which platform they're using, is really important, because it's showing people that we're functional. We're not offline every day. Our radiographs are making it to the cloud, and it doesn't take forever. So all these objection points are becoming, people are living with and understanding that they're not really a problem anymore.
Got it. Okay, so I want to ask a question and change gears on us a little bit.
Can I add just a quick comment, Gary?
Yeah.
My reaction to Tanner's question was wrong question, because I heard, maybe you didn't mean it this way, what I processed was where, and my mind was, well, what message, and then the where comes after that, because I think if the issue is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, then I think Eric's answer was exactly right, which is, tell the story through the eyes of people that have been through it. The other thing is kind of, the idea of lost opportunity. Here's what you're missing out. The innovation that is happening at a faster rate. Those on the cloud will eventually pull away from a capability standpoint and accelerate from those that are on, a platform that isn't so nimble, like the server-based stuff. So that was kind of my reaction.
I like that. I like
Gary,
that perspective.
Ken, I just had to add one more point to this that piece, right? I think the referenceability of those offices moving to the cloud needs to have a track record of outstanding success for true adoption to basically happen to the cloud, right? Because in effect, you're taking people off of systems who have been on, for the last 20 years, 15 years, people are used to certain aspects of behavior, right? You're really disrupting their comfort. And therefore, the benefit has to be transformational for true adoption to get into a zone of scale. It can be incremental. It can be just small benefits, right? From a cloud provider standpoint, as products become more mature, as products start looking at this whole transition from the lens of transformation and create like transformational benefits to offices which are switching to the cloud, I think we would see a more a bigger critical mass of believers that is referenceable enough to propagate the cloud movement in dentistry. And so it's two part. One is, all of the education can certainly work, but I think the onus is also on the software providers, the cloud software providers, to really push the envelope of innovation and keep the focus tight on really creating a truly transformative experience that that creates that degree of referenceability for cloud adoption.
What does a transformational experience look like for an end user of your product? If I was going to buy one, if I'm starting a dental office tomorrow, what is this transformational experience what should I be looking for?
I have a reference on one of them, which is, when I was at Next, what Steve Jobs would beat the crap out of us on. If it's not 10x better, don't bother. Like it has to be 10x better to overcome the inertia, and that's kind of what his perspective was. And like, who's going to argue with him? I'm certainly not. But it has to be big. It has to be a big deal.
I can say that for Oryx, and I know we don't want to get into specific features, but I would say the clinical part is our 10x. So when people think of something transformational, I can't get a true clinical component unless I move to Oryx, unless I move to the cloud. And I think each software has their own transformational piece, but people are realizing, like, I either have to buy 5 additional third-party add-ons, or I have to go with a cloud system to get what I really care about.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer from my perspective. If there's one thing that I'd synthesize this down to, it's being able to do everything through one system. The ability to communicate with your patients, take forms. I think the world is predominantly pretty antiquated on-premise software, and then a bunch of applications that kind of surround the old software to be able to do things like communicate with patients or take payments or be able to do forms or treatment plans. So the movement to the cloud allows you to operate from a user perspective and also from an owner perspective, not having to have 5 different vendors within one single platform. I think it's not quite the 10x, I'd say, but it's definitely the benefit that I think we're all probably articulating.
When we talk about dental software and what is transformational about dental software, you can't really bring transformational just from the software layer alone, right? Because at the end of it, it's software plus what you deliver to the users, and also to the entire process of getting them to adapt to a change management process that they least joyful about, right? So that being said, the transformational component of your software is really part of a larger integrated service delivery model that cuts across software to onboarding to support to ongoing account management, that really you need as a company to think about how can you do much more for your customers than what they're paying you for, and bring that mindset into an integrated delivery model, all the way from software to constant account management for success. That combination is what creates that transformational experience, and it, including us, I think across the industry, we have to really put all of our focus on getting that end-to-end service delivery model very astute to deliver that transformational experience.
Perfect. So this actually leads in right into our next question, because there's a lot of debate around this, and there's a lot of questions in my head about this. So should a PMS, from your guys' perspective, should it be an everything in one, where you have all these services in the one PMS, or should it be a PMS that integrates with all and has a bunch of specialized people that they're integrating with that do a bunch of different little things? For the listening audience, the way I think of integrate with all is like an iPhone, where you have applications on the iPhone, and pretty much anything that you want to access, you can get it on your iPhone and you can work from it from there. And then and everything in one, this is where you have one software that kind of does everything in one place for you. What are your guys' thoughts on the right way to tackle this from a practice management software?
Yeah, I guess I'll take a shot at it. There's 2 questions. One is the experience, and the other is how do you get there? And I think you need to separate the two. Who wouldn't want, an experience that all of these things work together, and you didn't really care what was underneath the hood. So the destination is for sure the right destination. Now the question is, well, how do I get there? Do I do best of breed and build a solution? So I pick the best of any, whatever the component is, I pick the best one, and I bring it together? Or do I go with a single vendor who has, usually the way it works out is pretty solid in each area and a couple of outstanding modules, but they do a good job with everything, and they do really great on a couple of things. Both are decent answers, and both are, I think, successful answers. The question is, who's accountable for making it all work? And I think that's where the difference is. In cloud software, at the end of the day, Abhi kind of touched on it, which is the vendor's actually responsible for your success as much, and I would argue maybe a bit more than you are. Whether it's onboarding, whether it's the pieces working together, whether it's a best of breed integrated with APIs and all the technology pieces that go underneath it, you can make that work. The challenge is, in that world, every component that you assembled is in itself changing asynchronously of all the other guys in the collective, if you will. And who's going to be accountable for making sure that every piece works every time? There's an engineering way to do that, and it's doable. It's a bit more challenging, but you could argue, if you really accomplish it, it's a better solution. But it's pretty hard to accomplish.
I'll give you my perspective. I think that's well said. The way I think about it, a good practice management system should have the ability to do pretty much everything, but I don't think a user should be required to use all of necessarily what the practice management software does. So from a workflow perspective, it's so much more ideal to do most things within a single system, but we are all busy trying to optimize the functionality of all different types of modules and stuff within Dynamic. We're not going to innovate as quickly as people around the PMS. So I think it's a balance. You want to keep the option for users to use what they want, but you also want to focus on what is really done best within your software and try to make the experience the best for people to use the software itself.
Yeah, I would agree with Eric, Gary, on that one. And in dental in particular, if you look at add-on products, the degree of rigor that you would need around a practice management product, in terms of creating a great user experience and in terms of serving the workflow functions needed, is way higher compared to the bolt-on products that exist in the industry, right? And these things have such tight relation to one another that if there is not responsible use, when you use multiple systems from a interoperability, data sharing, data exchange perspective, there could be impacts on the practice management side that can really result in having disruptions to practice operations. And the degree of maturity that you would typically find in software vendors who are in dental, probably, I think a lot of those vendors also need education around the constraints within which a practice management software truly operates. So I think it's a very tricky slope to answer that question, right? There are certain aspects of these modules where you are far better off providing a fully built-in solution that actually allows you to close the loop and effect behavioral change all within the same system, because it's a far better viable and a more risk-free way of solving for a certain solution. And then there are certain aspects which vendors can really do, which do not have a lot of dependency on the core workflows, which where the point solutions can do a much better job, right? So I think that those are the considerations we need to put in place.
One thing that I think is probably more similar as an analogy than what Gary mentioned with the iPhone would be something like a CRM for another organization. And granted, the CRMs aren't going to have as dedicated of a workflow as like a PMS, right? There's a lot more broad you have a lot more customization in it. As I've gone through and mapped out kind of how I've ranked out or how we're reviewing different PMS softwares, we've listed out 100 plus different features that a PMS should be providing, right? Could be providing. And amongst those 100, what is the likelihood of developing a best-in-class solution? I think a lot of you have already touched on this, that the ideal is that you have the best-in-class all within one umbrella. The likelihood is a very different thing from the reality of all the different points or perspectives that are coming at it. I think there's also this third perspective, though, of what is considered best in class for one customer is not considered best in class for another, right? The demands of the customer are ever changing, and a lot of the times even conflicting with each other. And so when does it get to a point that the best solution then for the end customer actually says, we're going to facilitate this connection to a third party to make it easier, because we know that one way that we do it is going to appease a group of people, but it's actually going to make another group of people upset, right? So when does the decision between building a feature set internally one way, our way, shift to let's open it up and let other people build that feature set?
I think it depends on what you want to optimize for, because look at there's pros and cons to each methodology. And so what do you want to optimize? For example, the benefit of having one way to do that is standardization and process and consistency. And, if you do it right, you can build a true ideal process that an average person can then perform like above average, because the process shepherds them down that path. So that's a benefit. If you want to make a trade-off and say, look, I'm okay with the variance between offices in pursuit of a optimization on let's say just the communication side of the business, the dealing with the patients and the reminders and all of that. You're going to take some risk on integration if you really need the integration, because who's accountable? Who do you call when those two systems don't talk to each other? Someone has to be accountable for making sure that it works. And if you're willing to take that trade-off, because in your mind's eye, for you at your point in where you are in the practice, that's a good trade-off, then so be it. Down that path you go. I do think that even the all-in-ones have to have a certain amount of extensibility. At what level, I think it's yet to be seen from what I can tell in the industry so far.
Rick, in your experience, real quick, and Abhi, I would love to hear your feedback on that. In your experience, what is a good all-in-one platform in any industry?
In my background, I dealt with thousands and thousands of large enterprises, and what they end up doing is they rely on their process, and they drive that into a configurable product, not a customizable product, but a configurable product. And there's a big difference, because the vendor's still accountable for, hey, no matter what switches I switch, it's still got to work, and if it doesn't, it's your fault. And as a vendor, I go like, yes, it is, and we're on it. But I think that's the secret sauce in how to deal with a dilemma: is configurable, yes; customizable, be very careful with that concept. Open, it depends on how much open is, because at some point you become customizable, and that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of opportunities for improving upon the extensibility and the interoperability that practice management software systems can do on our side. So certainly I would vouch for that to the extent that we have to do it eventually to really make sure that the consumer has a better accessibility to care and more transparency, and we can really work towards an integrated care model, which is where the future of dentistry is anyways heading, right? So the on the interoperability bit, and then on the extensibility bit, we can certainly do a damn better job than where we are today, right? Meanwhile, on the same token, as we create our ecosystem of technology partners and best-in-class solutions, which can work really well with PMS systems, I also think that we need to have a broader discussion around the point about accountability that Rick was just mentioning, right? And also make sure that the third-party integrators are more educated and aware about the guardrails that's needed while working with practice management systems, and to work off in a manner that creates a that doesn't look at just one slice of solution as too deep, to the extent that you start ignoring the repercussions in other pieces of the operations as you try to perfect things, right? So those guardrails are quite efficient for an ecosystem to function very, very well. And I think the vendors need other vendors need better source of education and more frameworks within which we can all coexist and create value for the end customer.
So I want to go ahead and pivot. Eric or Dr. Saleh, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that was all said. I think there's probably a balance between like the philosophical open architecture question, which I think you're hitting on, Tanner, pretty well, which is like ultimately as a user, I want to be able to work with vendors I want to work with, and the balance of where we are as an industry from a cloud transformation standpoint. Like you asked an interesting question related to like where is there an all-in-one solution that works in industries. I think you find in kind of technological transformations, eventually when there's a mature cloud market, you end up with a lot more necessity for innovation around the PMS or around the system of record. We all have to invest in our products in ways that we think are best, and some of that is open architecture versus building core functionality in the product itself. So, like, I think this conversation will have a different feel in 3 or 4 years, hopefully, as the cloud adoption starts to take more hold. But I think it's an interesting question, and I think there's a philosophical and probably a practical answer to it.
I think that even in the shift within the on-premise products, right? Like you saw that shift happen where they were closed off earlier on, and then as it kind of developed, they became a lot more open. And so I think that, as you alluded to, Eric, that same shift is happening right now in the cloud space as well, as you're having to develop and kind of build that out. I love that. So the next question that we wanted to pivot to is, I know that there's a lot of people that are kind of sitting on the fence of, should I switch PMS softwares or not, right? So if you were to guide somebody that was thinking about potentially switching a PMS, and you could only give them advice on one specific topic or feature or module or something to focus on, what would it be?
Tana, I think it goes back to what we were talking before, right? Usually people don't switch PMS systems around a feature or around a workflow, right? For example, we had a recent customer win where the business decided to switch the system after 28 years of using the same system. 28 years, big practice with 20 plus operatories, right? And what it took them to really switch a system with such degree of change management and risk to the destabilization of operations is really the existing PMS vendor being unavailable and going down for a week, which took a beating on production, right? PMS systems really happen in some of these events of destabilization with the existing vendor, in spite of repeated cries, help is not available. Like a week's worth of production lost, right? And you're seeing direct hit to the bottom line, and you see no light at the end of the tunnel. That's usually the majority of people who are out there on the market looking to switch systems. So it's never tied to a feature. It's not a feature game, right? It's far more holistically a pain-based journey, and users have really lost hope in their existing incumbent providers to the extent that they need to find something else. That's the premise with which a user basically decides to make a switch to a PMS system, right? Our whole focus is to really figure out, how we can be in front of those users who are out there and who experience this pain for a variety of reasons. It could be all the way from, the servers crashing down frequently to the extent that now the appointments are getting checked out on paper, or charting is being done on paper, right? The server unable to keep up with the load and things hanging down, and you can't really process payments while the patient is in office. Real critical things that so these events of pain could be much more much more in detail as you go through that process of qualification as to what is inducing a switch, right? But some of those common pain points are along the lines of, hey, having to spend on new hardware, and no, just unable to basically keep up with the current load on the current system, frequent servers crashing down, um, you know, uh, not enough communication between the multiple systems that they use, which is causing patient level frustration. So it's a variety of reasons that really drives them to that. But the common denominator in this whole journey is it's hitting their bottom line. So that's the larger focus that we should have. And there are several ways to be in front of those people, which typically happens through marketing and demand generation channels. But you only figure out what that process truly is as you go through a process of questioning, and then from there you're able to figure out, if your solution can truly address those few major pain points that is causing them to find an alternative. So to sum it up, it's not a feature. This whole process is not built around benefits, around features and few workflows, right? It has to be looked at far more holistically.
I see it, Abhi, a little bit less of a pain journey. I see it more of a growth journey. And this has been my experience recently, a lot more than a few years ago. I see that people that are considering the shift to the cloud are, we see a lot of DSOs, obviously, and they're seeing that as, how can I standardize my care? How can I have the growth that I need to have? How can I collect the data that I need in order to grow the way I want? So the pain points of servers and all of that do exist, but I'm seeing that people are embracing more the cloud because they see the opportunities for growth.
Yeah, I guess my answer to, if I could give one piece of advice, what would it be? It would be very simply use the software the way it was designed. Don't go off-roading, especially in the early days as you do the ramp up, because you've got enough issues just trying to get everybody through change management. I come from a world where, on Monday of some random day, we change all of Walmart's end users, employees, and crazier yet, all of their suppliers, which is an astronomical number. That's the cloud transitions that I've managed and kind of come from the background. And in the early days, everything, this all sounds deja vu. I've been involved with outages of the network, which is doing trillions of dollars of business on an annual basis. When that baby went down for a day, it was a bad day. So you learn how to mitigate that. You learn how to manage that. You learn how to have fail safes in place. You learn how to avoid those risk points. But you do have to go through the learning process of what does it do? What does it mean to do a pretty seamless conversion? And it's doable. I'm not saying anybody's there today, but it's doable. Because I've seen it done at a much, much larger scale with mission critical. I mean, if Walmart can't order their stuff, they're upset. I'll just leave it at that. For their stores, or Nestle, if they can't get their chocolate in, that's a problem of epic proportion. So we will overcome the short-term growing pains that I think we're all talking about, and I don't think it'll take as long because it's been solved in other industries. And so I think, and hopefully that's what I bring to this, is I've got that background. I don't know anything about the dental industry. I know a ton about cloud and how to help an industry get to cloud. And we'll get there. Some of us faster than others. That's awesome. Some of us better than others. That's awesome. We all serve our customers at the end of the day, and we all have our hearts in the right place. And we'll see some lessons learned from each other as we go.
I think whether it be the opportunity that you're looking for, or the pain you're trying to overcome, I think you're very much betting on the company and the partnership. Like, I think as I was listening to all the answers there, I think it's right. It's a complex, difficult, troubling journey and maybe Rick, hopefully you can help us solve that as an industry, because I think it's tough. But But I think ultimately you're looking to find a partner that you're going to grow with for the next 10, 15 years. You don't want to do this again. So the company that's able to innovate and present some of the solutions that, or be able to reduce the switching costs and make it less painful to switch. Like that's I think what you're betting on, and that would be my one piece of advice. Understand the company you're working with.
I think that's a huge takeaway. Is what is their vision, or where are they going? Because it is still developing. And this leads me into my last question. What is from your perspective and where you're building your companies, what does the world of PMSing look like in the next 3 to 5 years?
So, I think the world of PMS is, we'll certainly see as an existential need to invest heavily on creating extensible, interoperable systems. That's one direction in which this industry is gonna move, right? So that the consumer at the end of the day has the benefit of access to information and is able to share that information with other healthcare providers in their total journey towards wellness, right? So that's certainly one path where we'll see a lot of innovation happening. The second piece is basically on creating better decision support systems within the clinical side through application of a variety of technologies. And I don't mean just image-based AI, but um, technology which uses decision management systems, which uses data science, NLP, voice interpretation, AI, all with the end goal of really creating better opportunities for quality, compliance, and also serve as an enablement for associate doctors to really ramp up their production, right, and gain that kind of support. So we'll see like innovation in that space. We'll also see a deep degree of focus around front and back office enablement, primarily looking at usage of personalization as a key component to workflows, right? Ability to, and then it's a very fine balance between configurability and customization, but you will see a lot more capabilities around personalizing the workflow experience on the front and the back, in terms of easing down change management as we start transitioning from systems. We would also see the nature in which PMS systems use data and analytics. Right now it's very reactive from a consumption standpoint, which means analytics is quite often considered as a reactive tool to really figure out what went wrong. That position will change, and it will shift to analytics basically occupying a more front seat position where some of those insights are really leveraged at the forefront of the process to stop behaviors from happening, right? So you'll see a more proactive way in which analytics basically takes shape as part of workflows. We'll see better consumer engagement functions, right? Not just between the provider and the consumer, but more holistically, we can actually take this whole interaction to have better consumer engagement that has a touch point into the payer and into the employer, to the extent that payers have a more connected experience with what's happening on the ground, and there is an opportunity to redesign benefit plans to providers, in order for them to incentivize providers to take action, which creates an overall health benefit for the consumer. We would also see, more investments going where the employer market starts responding in a favorable manner, that you have allocation of spend on benefit design, leveraging some of these insights. So better systems that can have that can look at consumer as an endpoint across, not just between the provider and the patient, but more from a payer and from an employer standpoint, right? So I think we'll see innovation in all of these things. And lastly, we would also see, capabilities which are basically crossing over between dental and medical, coming up as a necessity as we start basically bringing on features for, monitoring vitals to creating unified treatment plans, pretty much, supporting this whole journey of creating like an integrated care model, and eventually with the ability to create a unified treatment plan, in a team-based care model. So we could possibly see all of these things happen across PMS. I don't mean one PMS, but across PMS in order to cater to the demands of the market.
I guess I live in a simpler world. I think it's going to be the biggest thing. I think is going to come upon us is just intolerance of stuff not working together. I think the bar, given how much time they want to spend in the technology, given the rate of innovation in all the pieces, I think just the pressure on the vendors and, hey, this stuff needs to just work. Like, I don't want to know the details. If I want to configure it, great. If I want to spend that time, energy, money, and maybe some headaches, then great. But I think this us vendors like us are going to feel a lot of pressure to just make it work, and not bother me with the details unless I ask a bunch of questions or I see something that's not part of it. So I think the weight on our shoulders to be accountable for the customer success will go up dramatically as we transition more and more to the cloud and more innovation happening at different rates. That I think is the thing, and I encourage that. I mean, it should just work, right? I mean, that was kind of a tagline in a previous life. It just works, and it's up to us. It's not our customer's problem. It's our problem, and I think they'll be pretty aggressive at pointing that out. And good for them. Good for us too, by the way.
Yeah, well, this has been really, really good. I learned a ton. I think this is going to be amazing for our audience, and we're going to be splitting this up and putting it out into the world. And I would like to continue to expand this conversation. So if you guys are open to it, I would love to do this again in the near future and get some other people on here and get some different perspectives. And I think you guys did a great job of presenting your side of the story.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for hosting. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Thanks, and good to meet everybody.
Likewise.
Yep. Welcome
Thanks,
to
guys.
the dental industry. Once you're here, you
Yeah.
can't leave. So that's cool.
Welcome, Rick.
Yeah. Yep. And,
Thanks. I appreciate it.
We'll
Looking
put all
forward
your
to it.
guys' contact information and all the content down below. So if you guys want to learn more and get a demo and get an understanding of what the differences are and how these different platforms work, just check out right below this video. We'll have all the information there for you.